Straight to the comments now. Boris Johnson is making his statement.
Of this new Conservative government. But before I begin, I'm sure the whole House will join me in paying tribute to my right honourable friend, the member for Maidenhead, for all she has given to the service of our nation. From fighting modern slavery to tackling the problems of mental ill health, she has a great legacy on which we shall all be proud to build. And our mission is to deliver Brexit on the 31st of October for the purpose of uniting and re-energising our great United Kingdom and making this country the greatest place on earth. And when I say the greatest place on earth, I'm conscious that some may accuse me of hyperbole. But it is useful to imagine the trajectory on which we could now be embarked. By 2050, it is more than possible that the United Kingdom will be the greatest and most prosperous economy in Europe, at the centre of a new network of trade deals, which we have pioneered, with the road and rail investments we are making and propose to make now, the investment in broadband and 5G. Our country will boast the most formidable transport and technological connectivity on the planet by unleashing the productive power of the whole United Kingdom, not just of London and the South East, but of every corner of England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. We will have closed forever the productivity gap and seen to it that no town is left behind ever again, no community ever forgotten. Our children and grandchildren will be living longer, happier and healthier lives. And our kingdom in 2050, thanks, by the way, to the initiative of the previous Prime Minister, will no longer make any contribution whatsoever to the destruction of our precious planet brought about by carbon emissions, because we will have led the world in delivering that net zero target. We will be the home of electric vehicles, cars, even planes, powered by British-made battery technology, being developed right here, right now. We will have the free ports to revitalise our coastal communities, a bioscience sector liberated from anti-genetic modification rules, blight-resistant crops that will feed the world, and the satellite and Earth observation systems that are the envy of the world. We will be the seedbed for the most exciting and most dynamic business investments on the planet. Our constitutional...
Order, I apologise for interrupting the Prime Minister. There's far too much noise in this chamber. And far too many members who think it's all right for them to shout out their opinion at the Prime Minister. Well, let's be clear, it isn't. The statement will be heard and there will be ample opportunity, in conformity with convention and as established by me over the last decade, for colleagues to question the Prime Minister. But the statement will be heard, and it will be heard with courtesy. The Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, may I applaud your intervention, and I think there's also far too much negativity about the potential of our great country. I think you will agree, Mr. Speaker, because our constitutional settlement, our United Kingdom, will be firm and will be secure. Our union of nations beyond question. Our democracy robust. Our future clean, green, prosperous, united, confident and ambitious. And that is the prize, and that is our responsibility in this House of Commons to fulfil. And to do so, we must take some immediate steps. And the first is to restore trust in our democracy and fulfil the repeated promises of Parliament to the people by coming out of the European Union and doing so on October the 31st. I and all ministers are committed to leaving on this date, whatever the circumstances, and to do otherwise would cause a catastrophic loss of confidence in our political system. It would leave the British people wondering whether their politicians could ever be trusted again to follow a clear democratic instruction. I would prefer us to leave the EU with a deal. I would much prefer it. I believe that it is possible even at this late stage, and I will work flat out to make it happen. But certain things need to be clear. The withdrawal agreement negotiated by my predecessor has been 3 times rejected by this House. Its terms are unacceptable to this Parliament and to this country. No country that values its independence and indeed its self-respect could agree to a treaty which signed away our economic independence and self-government as this backstop does. A time limit is not enough. If an agreement is to be reached, it must be clearly understood that the way to the deal goes by way of the abolition of the backstop. For our part, we are ready to negotiate in good faith an alternative, with provisions to ensure that the Irish border issues are dealt with where they should always have been in the negotiations on the future agreement between the UK and the EU. I do not accept the argument that says these issues can only be solved by all or part of the UK remaining in the customs union or in the single market. The evidence is that other arrangements are perfectly possible and are also perfectly compatible with the Belfast or Good Friday Agreement, to which we are, of course, steadfastly committed. My team and my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State for Exiting the European Union, are ready to meet and talk on this basis to the Commission or other EU colleagues whenever, wherever they're ready to do so. And for our part, we will throw ourselves into these negotiations with the greatest energy and determination and in a spirit of friendship. And I hope that the EU will be equally ready and that they will rethink their current refusal to make any changes to the withdrawal agreement. If they do not, we will of course have to leave the UK without an agreement under Article 50. The UK is better prepared for that situation than many believe. But we are not as ready yet as we should be. In the 98 days that remain to us, we must turbocharge our preparations to make sure that there is as little disruption as possible to our national life. And I believe that that is possible with the kind of national effort that the British people have made before and will make again. And in these circumstances, we would, of course, have available the £39 billion in the withdrawal agreement to help deal with any consequences. I have today instructed the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster to make these preparations his top priority. I have asked the Cabinet Secretary to mobilise the civil service to deliver this outcome should it become necessary. And the Chancellor has confirmed that all necessary funding will be made available. I will also ensure, 4.2 billion has already been allocated, I will also ensure that preparing for leaving the EU without an agreement under Article 50 is not just about seeking to mitigate the challenges, but also about grasping the opportunities. This is not just about technical preparations, vital though they are. It is about having a clear economic strategy for the UK in all scenarios, something in which the Conservative Party has always led the way. And it's about producing policies which will boost the competitiveness and the productivity of our economy when we are free of EU regulations. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, we will begin right away on working to change the tax rules to provide extra incentives to invest in capital and research. We will now be accelerating the talks on those free trade deals. And we will prepare an economic package to boost British business and lengthen this country's lead, which seems so bitterly resented by the benches opposite. Lengthen this country's lead as the #1 destination in this continent for overseas investment, a status that is made possible at least partly by the diversity, the talent and the skills of our workforce. And Mr. Speaker, I also want therefore to repeat unequivocally our guarantee to the 3.2 million EU nationals now living and working among us. I thank them for their contribution to our society and for their patience, and I can assure them that under this government they will have the absolute certainty of the right to live and remain. Mr. Speaker, I want to end by making clear my absolute commitment to the 31st October date for our exit. Our national participation in the European Union is coming to an end, and that reality needs to be recognised by all parties. And indeed, Mr. Speaker, today there are very many brilliant officials, UK officials, trapped in meeting after meeting in Brussels and Luxembourg when they could be better deployed. They're deploying their talents in preparing to pioneer new free trade deals or promoting a truly global Britain. And I want to start unshackling our officials to undertake this new mission right away. So, we will not nominate a UK commissioner for the new commission taking office on the 1st of December, under no circumstances, though clearly this is not intended to stop the EU appointing a new commission. Mr. Speaker, today is the first day of a new approach, which will end with our exit from the EU on the 31st of October. Then I hope we can have a friendly and constructive relationship as constitutional equals, as friends and partners in facing the challenges that lie ahead. I believe that is possible, and this government will work to make it so. But, Mr. Speaker, we are not going to wait until the 31st of October to begin building the broader and bolder future that I have described. We're going to start right away, providing vital funding for our frontline public services to deliver better health care, better education and more police on the streets. Mr. Speaker, I am committed to making sure that the NHS receives the funds it deserves, receives the funds that were promised by the last government in June 2018, and these funds will go to the front line as soon as possible. This will include urgent funding for 20 hospital upgrades and winter readiness. I have asked officials to provide policy proposals for drastically reducing waiting times and for GP appointments. To address the rising tide of violence rise of violent crime in our country, I have announced that there will be 20,000 extra police, keeping us safe over the next 3 years. And I have asked my right honourable friend, the Home Secretary, to ensure that this is treated as an absolute priority. We will give greater powers resisted, by the way, by the party opposite, to the police to use stop and search to help tackle violent crime. I have also tasked officials to draw up proposals to ensure that in future those found guilty of the most serious sexual and violent offences are required to serve a custodial sentence that truly reflects the severity of their offence, and policy measures that will see a reduction in the number of prolific offenders. On education, I have listened to the concerns of so many colleagues around the House, and we will increase the minimum level of per pupil funding in primary and secondary schools and return education funding to levels that began by the end of this Parliament. We are committed to levelling up across every nation and region of the UK, providing support to towns and cities and closing the opportunity gap in our society. We will announce investment in vital infrastructure, full fibre rollout, transport and housing that can improve the quality of people's life, fuel economic growth and provide opportunity. Finally, we will also ensure that we will continue to attract the best and brightest talent from around the world. No one believes more strongly than me in the benefits of migration to our country. But I am clear that our immigration system must change. For years, politicians have promised the public an Australian-style points-based system, and today I will actually deliver on those promises. I will ask the Migration Advisory Committee to conduct a review of that system as the first step in a radical rewriting of our immigration system. And I am convinced that we can produce a system that the British public can have confidence in. Mr. Speaker, over the past few years, too many people in this country feel that they have been told repeatedly and relentlessly what we cannot do. Since I was a child, I remember respectable authorities asserting that our time as a nation has passed, that we should be content with mediocrity and managed decline. And time and again, these are the skeptics and doubters, my friend. again, by their powers to innovate and to adapt, the British people have showed the doubters wrong. And Mr. Speaker, I believe that at this pivotal moment in our national story, we are going to prove the doubters wrong again, not just with positive thinking and a can-do attitude, important though they are, but with the help and encouragement of a government and a cabinet that is bursting with ideas, ready to create change, determined to implement the policies that we need to succeed as a nation. The greatest place to live, the greatest place to bring up a family, the greatest place to send your kids to school, the greatest place to set up a business or to invest, because we have the best transport and the cleanest environment and the best healthcare and the most compassionate approach to care of elderly people. That is the mission of the cabinet I have appointed, and that is the purpose of the government I am leading. And that is why I believe that if we bend our sinews to the task now, there is every chance that in 2050, into it I fully intend to be around, though not necessarily in this job, we will be able to look back on this period, this extraordinary period, as the beginning of a new golden age for our United Kingdom. And I commend this future to the House just as much as I commend this statement, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome the Right Honourable Gentleman to his position, and I thank him for an advance copy of his statement. No one underestimates this country, but the country is deeply worried that the new Prime Minister overestimates himself. He inherits a country that's been held back by 9 years of austerity. That's hit children and young people the hardest. Their youth centres have closed, their school funding cut, college budgets slashed, and with the help of the Liberal Democrats, tuition fees have trebled. Their housing costs are higher than ever. Their jobs are lower paid. Opportunity and freedom have been taken away. Austerity was always a political choice, never an economic necessity.
I indicated that people wouldn't shout down the Prime Minister. Precisely the same applies to the Leader of the Opposition. Don't try it. You're wasting your vocal cords. And above all, it won't work. The Right Honourable Gentleman will be heard, and these exchanges will take as long as they will take, whatever other appointments people might have. The Right Honourable Gentleman will be heard. Stop it. Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. His predecessor promised to end austerity, but spectacularly failed to deliver. People do not trust his Prime Minister to make the right choices for the majority of people in this country, when he's also promising tax giveaways to the richest and big business, his own party's funders. So, can he now indicate when he will set out the detail of the exact funding settlement for our schools, our hard-pressed local authorities and police, so they can start planning now? We must also address the deep regional inequalities in this country. The Northern Powerhouse has been massively underpowered. The Midlands engine has not been fuelled. So will he match Labour's commitment to a $500 billion investment fund to rebalance this country through regional development banks and a national transformation fund? He has hastily thrown together a hard right cabinet. And I've just a couple of questions, Mr. Speaker, on those appointments. Given his first appointment, is the Home Secretary, the first Home Secretary for a generation to support the death penalty. Can the Prime Minister assure the House now that his government has no plans to try and bring back capital punishment to this country? And before appointing the new Education Secretary, was the Prime Minister given sight of the Huawei leak investigation by the Cabinet Secretary? I'm deeply alarmed to see no plan for Brexit. He was in the Cabinet that accepted the backstop and, of course, voted for it on the 30th of March this year. It would be welcome if he could set out what he finds so objectionable, having voted for it less than 4 months ago. Can he explain this flip-flopping? The House will have both a sense of déjà vu and of trepidation at a Prime Minister setting out rigid red lines and an artificial timetable. There is something eerily familiar about a Prime Minister marching off to Europe with demands to scrap the backstop. So how does the Prime Minister think he will succeed where his predecessor failed? However, I do welcome the Prime Minister's commitment to finally guarantee the rights of European Union citizens. It's a great shame that this offer has only been made now, more than 3 years after this party put that proposal before this House. Our friends, neighbours, family should never have been treated as bargaining chips, causing untold stress and worry to people that have worked so hard for this community, this country, and the communities that we make up. If the Prime Minister continues to pursue a reckless no deal, does he accept that he would be directly flouting the expressed will of this Parliament? Industry, business and unions have been absolutely clear about the threat that it poses. No deal means no steel, no car industry, food prices dramatically rising, and huge job losses. Make UK, representing much of manufacturing industry, says no deal would be the height of economic lunacy. Companies from Toyota to Asda have been clear about the dangers of no deal. Is the Prime Minister still guided by his business policy? Mr. Speaker, those recklessly advocating no deal won't be the ones who lose out. The wealthy elite that funds him and his party will not lose their jobs, see their living standards cut, or face higher food bills. Mr. Speaker, if the Prime Minister has confidence in his plan once he's decided what it is, he should go back to the people with that plan. Labour will oppose any deal that fails to protect jobs. We will oppose any deal that fails to protect jobs, workers' rights, or environmental protections. And if he has the confidence to put that decision back to the people, we would, in those circumstances, campaign to remain. Mr. Speaker, the office of... Mr. Speaker,
it'll take as long as it takes. I've got plenty of time. I'm totally untroubled by these matters. Jeremy Corbyn.
Mr. Speaker, the office of Prime Minister requires integrity and honesty. So will he correct his claim that kipper exports from the Isle of Man to the UK are subject to EU regulations? Will he also acknowledge that the 39 billion is now 33 billion, due over 30 years, and has been legally committed to be paid by his predecessor. This is a phony threat about a fake pot of money made by the Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we also face a climate emergency, so will he take the urgent actions necessary? Will he ban fracking? Would he back real ingenuity like the Swansea Bay tidal lagoon? Will he increase investment in carbon capture and storage? Will he back our solar industry and onshore wind, so devastated over the last 9 years? Will he set out a credible plan to reach net zero? Mr. Speaker, I note the climate change denying US President has already labelled him Britain's Trump and welcomed his commitment to work with Nigel Farage. Could Britain Trump take this opportunity to rule out once and for all that our NHS is not going to be part of any trade deal with President Trump and the USA? Will he make it clear that our National Health Service is not going to be sold to American healthcare companies? Mr. Speaker, people fear that far from wanting to take back control, the new Prime Minister would effectively make us a vassal state of Trump's America. Will he ask the new Foreign Secretary to prioritise the release of Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe? And is he working with European partners to restore the Iran nuclear deal and de-escalate tensions in the Gulf? Mr. Speaker, the challenge to end austerity, tackle inequality, resolve Brexit and tackle the climate emergency are what will define the new Prime Minister. Instead, we have a hard-right cabinet staking everything on tax cuts for the few and a reckless race to the bottom Brexit. He says he has pluck, nerve and ambition. Our country does not need arm-waving bluster, but competence, seriousness, and after a decade of divisive policies for the few, to focus for once on the interests of the many.
Mr. Speaker, I struggle to discover a serious question in that, but I'll make one answer, one important point that is worth making, which is that under no circumstances will we agree to any deal, any free trade deal that put the NHS on the table. It is not for sale. And I would remind the right honourable gentleman that for 44 years of its 71 years of glorious existence, it is the NHS that has benefited from conservative policies and conservative government. We understand that unless you support wealth creation, unless you believe in British business and British enterprise and British industry, you will not have the funds. Unless you have a strong economy, you will not be able to pay for a fantastic NHS, Mr. Speaker. And that is a lesson that the honourable gentleman, right honourable gentleman, simply doesn't get. And I struggled to see the country. I struggled to see the country he described in his description of the United Kingdom today, because the reality, Mr. Speaker, is that unemployment is, of course, down under the Conservatives to the lowest level since the 1970s. Crime is actually down a third since 2010. We have record investment, record inward investment in this country, £1.3 trillion coming. That's fantastic new electric car factories.
Order! Mr. MacDonald, you really are at times a reckless delinquent. Calm yourself, man. I know you get very irate because you feel passionately, and I respect your passion, but I don't respect your delinquency. Calm yourself, man. Take some sort of soothing medicament and you'll feel better as a consequence. The Prime Minister.
They don't like it, but the truth is that there were more homes built in this country last year than in any year in the last 31 years bar one. Wage Wages are now outperforming inflation for the first time in a decade. The living wage, a conservative policy, which I'm proud to say I championed in London and was then stolen by our wonderful Conservative government and put into a national policy. The living wage has expanded the incomes of those who receive it by £4,500 since 2010. That is a fantastic achievement, and it is a Conservative achievement. The right honourable gentleman asks about trust and who can you trust to run how on earth? And he asks about Iran. Mr. Speaker, a right honourable gentleman who has been paid by Press TV of Iran, who repeatedly sides with the mullahs of Tehran rather than our friends in the United States over what is happening in the Persian Gulf. How incredible that we should even think of entrusting that gentleman with the stewardship of this country's security. But worse than that, by far, Mr. Speaker, this is a right honourable gentleman who is set on an economic policy together with the shadow chancellor who was sacked by Ken Livingstone for being too left-wing. Sacked for fabricating a budget. He forged a budget. Sacked for forging a budget. He would raise taxes on inheritance, Mr. Speaker. He would raise taxes on pensions. I am answering. I'm telling you, Mr.
Order. Mr. Lavery, you're another overexcitable denizen of the House. Calm yourself. It would be therapeutic for you to do so. There's far too much noise on both sides of the House, and I fear that the noise on the front bench is proving contagious, and I note certain backbenchers who are becoming overexcitable, and they must restrain themselves. And I know the Prime Minister will, of course, be both passionate and restrained. The Prime Minister.
But it is only with an effort that I can master my feelings here, Mr. Speaker, because the right honourable gentleman will not only put up taxes on inheritance and pensions and corporations, he would put up taxes on income to 50p and above. He would put up taxes on income. There he is, the forger of the budget of 1984, Mr. Speaker. He would put up, give him a chance, he would put up taxes not just on homes but on gardens, Mr. Speaker. And he speaks about trust in our democracy. He speaks about trust in our democracy, Mr. Speaker. And I have to say, a most extraordinary thing has just happened today. Did anybody notice what happened today? Did anybody notice the terrible metamorphosis that took place, like the final scene of Invasion of the Body Snatchers? At last, this long-standing Eurosceptic, the right honourable gentleman, has been captured. He has been jugulated. He has been reprogrammed by his honourable friends. He has been turned now into a Remainer. He has turned Labour into the party in all the flip-flops he has performed in his tergiversating career. That is the one for which I think he will pay the highest price. Because it is this party now, this government, that is clearly on the side of democracy in this country. It is this party that is on the side of the people who voted so overwhelmingly in 2016. It is this party that will deliver the mandate that they gave to this Parliament, and which, by the way, this Parliament promised time and time again to deliver. And indeed, the right honourable gentleman and all his colleagues promised to deliver it. And the reality now is that we are the party of the people. We are the party of the many. We are the party of the many, and they are the party of the few. We will take this country forwards. They, Mr. Speaker, will take it backwards.
Mr. Ian Duncan Smith.
Mr. Speaker, can I unreservedly welcome my right honourable gentleman to his place. And can I say to him, today I think the EU will have listened and realised that the days of supplication are over and that we are intent on a policy to leave the European Union. But could I urge him in the course of his attempts at the dispatch box not to be too unkind to his opposite number. He hasn't just become a Remainer. Over the last 3.5 years, he has been trying to remain again and again and again, despite his own party's determination. And can I ask him also then, in the process of his preparation to leave without a deal, if that were necessary, could he now not allow us to do this in private? Could he instruct his right honourable friend that all of this should now be done in public, week by week, to tell the world, to tell the European Union, to tell our colleagues that we are nearly ready, and then finally we are ready to leave, if necessary, without a deal?
I thank my right honourable friend very much for that excellent question and the point that he makes, and it is vital now as we prepare for a better deal, a new deal, that we get ready, of course, for no deal. Not that I think that that will be the outcome, not that I desire that outcome, but it is vital that we prepare business, industry, every community in this country that needs farming, that needs the relevant advice. And as my right honourable friend has wisely suggested, there will be a very active and public campaign to do so.
Mr. Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and of course I should welcome the Prime Minister to his place, the last Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. You know, Mr. Speaker, it is often said that the Prime Minister lives in a parallel universe. Well, my goodness, that's been proven beyond any reasonable doubt this morning. In fact, it looked as if he was about to launch himself into outer space. Mr. Speaker, there are questions to be asked as to the mandate the Prime Minister has for the office he now occupies. He has been appointed not by this House, not by the people, but by the Tory party. What have they done? It horrifies me, Mr. Speaker, that the new Prime Minister finds his position through such an undemocratic process. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, it was the Prime Minister himself who called the system a gigantic fraud when Gordon Brown was parachuted into office just like he was 12 years ago. Mr. Speaker, Scotland did not vote for Brexit. We did not vote for no deal, and we most certainly did not vote for this Prime Minister. Will the Prime Minister accept the First Minister's call this morning for an urgent meeting of the heads of government? Mr. Speaker, Scottish Government analysis has shown a no deal will hit the economy hard, with a predicted hit to GDP of 8%, threatening up to 100,000 Scottish jobs. And just this week alone, we've seen the IMF, we've seen the CBI, the TUC, the food and drink industry, the British Chambers of Business, all warning of a no deal. The Office of Budget Responsibility have revealed that a no deal could lead to a plunge in the value of the pound and leave a £30 billion black hole in the public finances. What analysis has the Prime Minister made of no deal? Because when he was asked last week, Mr. Speaker, he had no answer. He wants us to drive us off the cliff edge, and he does not even know the impact of the damage it will cause. This is the height of irresponsibility. Economic madness driven by ideology. The Prime Minister supported by his new right-wing ideologues on the front bench. Mr. Speaker, a new deal from Europe is the stuff of fantasy. Time and time again, Europe has made it clear the withdrawal agreement is not open for negotiation. Last night, Leo Varadkar confirmed once again it will not happen. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has no plan. He is full of bluster, but the consequences of his fantasy land will have devastating consequences. He is deluded. Let me warn the Prime Minister now. Try to take Scotland, try to take the United Kingdom out of the European Union on a no-deal basis. We will stop the Prime Minister from doing so. This House will stop the Prime Minister. We will not let the Prime Minister do untold damage to the jobs and constituents of our country. Parliament will stop this madness in its tracks. The Prime Minister was elected by 0.13% of the population. He has no mandate from Scotland. He has no mandate in this House. Scotland has had a Tory government it didn't vote for 36 of the last 64 years. Mr. Speaker, the Barnett formula that protects spending in Scotland has been criticised by the Prime Minister, by the Home Secretary and the Foreign Secretary. Will the Prime Minister today rule out changing the Barnett formula, or is Scotland under attack from this Prime Minister? The whole internal Tory party crisis has been a democratic outrage. Scotland's First Minister has been clear that she's now reviewing the timetable for his second independence referendum. Mr. Speaker, Scotland will not stand by and let decisions be taken by charlatans on our behalf. And finally, Mr. Speaker, can I ask the Prime Minister, do the honourable thing, call a general election, let the people of Scotland have their say.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the right honourable gentleman for his suggestion. I would point out that the people of this country have voted in 2015, they voted in 2016, they voted in 2017. What they want to see is this Parliament delivering on the mandate that they gave us, and including him. And I take no criticism, Mr. Speaker. I take no criticism, Mr. Speaker, about my election from the party whose leader, Nicola Sturgeon, replaced Alex Salmond, as far as I know, without a vote. Did she not? And I tell you why I think the right honourable gentleman is completely wrong in his analysis and his defeatism and his pessimism about our wonderful United Kingdom, which he seeks to break up. Because let me tell you, Mr. Speaker, if we can deliver a fantastic and a sensible and a progressive Brexit, which I believe we can, and the whole United Kingdom comes out, as I know that it will, what happens then to the arguments of the Scottish Nationalist Party? Will they seriously continue to say that Scotland must join the euro independent? Will they seriously suggest that Scotland must submit to the entire panoply of EU law? And will they, Mr. Speaker, will they join Schengen? And will they, is it really their commitment, Mr. Speaker, to hand back control of Scottish fisheries just after this country, this great United Kingdom, has taken back that fantastic resource? Is that really the policy of the Scottish Nationalist Party? May I respectfully suggest to the right honourable gentleman that is not the basis on which to seek election in Scotland. We will win on a manifesto for the whole United Kingdom.
Sir Edward Lee.